you do not understand white supremacy, what it is, and how it works, everything else that you do understand will confuse you. In all of these 9 areas of activity, economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, and war. Anywhere on the planet, minute by minute, day by day, all of the time, all of the time, all of the time.
Good morning, and welcome to the Counter Racist Code Show with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. I am your co-host, Mr. Bobby. Good morning, Mr. Fuller.
Good morning, sir.
All righty, we have our usual people that help guide the show on, and the chat room is open. We have a full stage of all books are in. KJ just joined the chat room. Thank you. Mata VGQ is in the house. Okay, that's good. Mr. Fuller has stated that all problems can be solved through the process of questions and answers. And I've been going through a lot of the Gmails and looking at them and a lot of the comments that have been made. And one of the things that I discovered is that I wondered if people really know how to solve problems. I found quite a few things that Mr. Fuller has said, and I'm going to play one of them right now. Let's see if I can get this up here. Okay, here we go.
To help you, just like the callers, some of the callers this morning, to get through your day. That's what the book is for. Each and every person of color, everywhere on the planet, I wrote it for that, that encounters any type of problem, either directly or indirectly associated with racism primarily, but the problems that black people have in their interactions with each other under the system of racism, because we have plenty of those too. And it's supposed to tell you how to get through the day. It's supposed to help you. You pick up the book. I've recommended that the book be read, not try to do it at one sitting, wait till you get to a vacation time, quote unquote, and try to read it from cover to cover then. But if you can do that, if you have that kind of time, but the average person doesn't have that kind of time. So I tried to write the book in such a way that you can just open it at any page. It's any time during the day, during your lunch break or whatever, or riding a bus or whatever. And just open it to any page and see if you see something there that will catch your imagination, that will help you to get through the day, that will help you to solve a problem that's going to come up during the day, because we have oceans of problems, okay? And try to help you to see things, at least in a way that you'll get to the truth of a matter. See things from a different perspective from what you're used to that might be of more productive or constructive value than what you have been thinking of before. That's how the book is written. That's what I wrote the book for, problem solving. And you want to put it in 2 words, that's what it's about, for the individual person. You don't have to consult with anybody. You don't even have to agree with what you're looking at. You just turn the page and see if you agree with whatever's on the next page. That's how I tried to write the book. It's selective. It's like a buffet, like you go into a cafe and you just go down the line and they have all the food laid out, and you just pick and choose whatever you think will fit your circumstances. And if you don't find anything there, well, just close the book. And put it away or shove it aside, and maybe one day something will come up. Maybe you'll look at the book again and will address that particular thing. Because that's how I use the book myself, my own book. It's a textbook workbook for victims of white supremacy, for thought, speech, and action for victims of white supremacy. You can get it by going to producejustice.com. That's producejustice.com. And what would come up on the screen is the method for ordering.
Mr. Fuller, listening to that, Listening to that, let's see if I can get this stopped here. Okay. I recall at one point, and several points actually, you have mentioned that white supremacy, racism is the number one problem that we have, and I do believe you said that if we solve that problem, that all the other problems that we have can be solved. Would that be correct?
Yes, I say that in the book.
Yes.
You can't solve, just solving what we call everyday problems, the routine problems, is all within the context of the system of white supremacy. Why? Because the system of white supremacy dominates the thinking of people all over the world. It's the greatest influence. If you're looking for what influences people more than anything, what philosophy, what perspective about our entire existence on this planet. When I say our, I mean in all people, directly and indirectly, that are influenced more by the system of white supremacy than any other philosophy, religion, form of government, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Why? Because it's the dominant government of the entire planet. It's the supreme government. It has more influence than all other so-called governments and philosophies and religions combined. It actually does. And not just because I'm saying so. The evidence shows this. If people look at everything in fine detail and say, where are the greatest influences coming from? The things that motivate people to do whatever they do more than anything. Through the movies, through what is written, through all of the comings and goings of people, people looking for jobs, people looking for what am I here for? Philosophers. What is the greatest influence? I was just reading something this morning talking about sororities and fraternities, and it has a lot of influence, and people are bound to them, particularly like this fall, people going into colleges and whatnot, and they are trying to make up their mind whether to try to join a sorority or a fraternity, for instance. Okay, what is the root of sororities and fraternities? And they say Greek. And Greek, when you think about Greek, you think first of all about something called quote unquote Western civilization. And what is Western civilization, quote unquote? Well, it's surrounded by people, if you're talking about along racial lines, you're talking about white. That's what you're talking about. White. W-H-I-T-E. And white what? White supremacy. White civilization. If you want to compare white civilization with other civilizations, there are other civilizations are in the category of also ran. I mean, they're way back somewhere, in oblivion. They don't even exist in any significant way. And even black people are saying, I'm going to join a sorority. I'm going to live the Greek life. And it's mentioned this morning in this Washington Post. They're going through a dilemma right now, here in September 23rd, 2020, first day of fall, and people are entering colleges now. And they are, they say, well, it's real important if you become a member of a sorority or a fraternity, and then if you're talking about anything else in the lives of people on the planet, you're talking about making progress. It's always associated with what? What white people are doing. Not just any white people, but the people who really believe in and practice white supremacy. And everybody runs and tries to catch up. if they're people of color. I want to be like that. I want to be successful. Well, who sets the standards for being successful? The white supremacists. That's what white supremacy is, functionally. It's a territorial God of the universe on the planet Earth here in 2020. And so a person might say, well, what's wrong with white supremacy then? Well, it's based on deceit and violence, and it's set up to deliberately mistreat people. That's what's wrong with it.
Mm-hmm.
Don't want to use the term wrong. It's not the best form of government. The best form of government is a government of what? From a concept. Justice. A peaceful government. Not a government that worships war, enslavement of people, making jokes out of doing harm to people. Most of the jokes in so-called Western civilization is by doing harm to someone and making it funny. Saying something derogatory about somebody and everybody laughs. These things are not harmless, but that's what you get from a system of white supremacy. If everybody just tells the truth, including white people and black people, everybody sit down, say, what do we really mean by white supremacy or so-called Western civilization? Is it really civilized? Are people really interacting with each other in a civil manner? No, we are war worshippers, all of us. Conflict. We've been taught that this is some type of spiritual high that is very productive. And it is when it comes to material things. But it does not generate interaction between people that is of quality relationships. People should have, in capital letters, quality relationships. You can't find a decent relationship anywhere in the system of white supremacy, which is the greatest influence.
Yeah, it reminds me of something you always say: fun, glory, or and material gain against people of color. Thank you for the people who are listening in the concept called Madagascar. We thank you for that, and for those of you who want to call in, you can. You can call this number 516-453-9921, and if you have a question or some VGQ, then press the number 1 button and you will go to the head of the line. You can also do this. You can Gmail me at the numero 7, Mr. Bobby, B-O-B-B-Y, at gmail.com, and I will effort to read it today, but mind you, there are quite a few that are in front of you, and you will go to the bottom of the page, but eventually I will read it, and then I'll let you know. Let's see here. Let's go to this question from the Gmails. This comes from Manifesting. Says this, hey, Mr. Bobby, thank you for answering my last question. That means you, Mr. Fuller. My next question is, why is it that Mr. Fuller rarely talks about the other prisoners, such as Hispanics that were captured in South America, or the Asians that also occupy this country?
Oh, I do. If you read the textbook, the term that I use mostly is non-white. When I say black, that's what I mean. I mean non-white. It's the same thing. Black, brown, yellow, beige, tan. People, they use a cliche saying, one that I think also fits. I use it, and that is people of color, rather than people of non-color, who are called white. That's why the white supremacists refer to people of color as colored people. people of color, any way that you want to say it, you're just talking about skin color. That's the criteria for doing all the business here on the planet called Earth. That's the main criteria, what color somebody is. Let's consider that first, and then we'll talk about all the other stuff later. But get that straight first. This guy who is fixing to come through the door, what color is he? What color is he before he comes in here so I can get my mind set according to white supremacist standards? Get it straight about who's going to walk through that door and what color the person is. Not what the person is here for, what the person thinks about this, what the person's background is, what the person's ambitions are. I want to know before he walks in here or she walks in here, what color is that person? Get that straight. That's the holy grail of all standards for conduct on this planet. What color is this person? Does this person have color in his or her skin? Well, I'll go back out and check. So they go back out. Yeah, it looks like they have a little bit of color. Well, a little bit, find out how much. Can they be classified as white? White or non-white, these are the categories. It doesn't move from that. White, non-white. Is the person white? You can even just forget about the white, or the non-white rather. Just say, is the person white? Can you look at this person and tell that this person is definitely white? Well, if you can't, go back and take another look. I don't care if you have to spend all day and all next week and all next year. Make sure that you know that that's a white person fixing to walk in that door to talk to me. Or a non-white person. Because I got a script for either one. And that script for each one is nowhere parallel. They are not on the same level at all, under any circumstance, in any one of the 9 areas of activity: economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, or war. We have categories for people who are classified as non-white. And we have categories of what we're going to do and not do for people who are white. That's the white supremacist system. Get that straight. That's gospel. More than anything, no gospel superior to that. No religion, no philosophy, no nothing. That's it.
Okay.
The white supremacist code is powerful.
Yes.
The most powerful thing that anybody's ever seen on the planet other than the Creator itself.
People don't like when you say that. I've gotten Gmails
about
that.
Oh, for sure.
They don't like that. Let's see, manifestation continues, but I think you just answered this question. He said, my next question is, could Mr. Fuller put emphasis on how the color of your skin could result in mistreatment?
Oh, that's what the entire book is about. It's the greatest mistreatment of people on a grand scale in recorded history, not according to Neely Fuller. And like you just said, people say they don't like that term white supremacy. Find some other term. Find some other term for the truth. It's either true or false. Now, if it's false, I have no business on the air at all. And then we can start talking about something else as the main problem. But I'm saying you're not going to solve any problem in the known universe between people without having to take into account the main problem, and that is racism in the form of white supremacy. Mm-hmm. All problems stem from that because that's the most powerful philosophy on the planet. Now, if it isn't, I want someone to call in and say, stop using the term white supremacy because of. There's no such thing as that, and I'll tell you where the real problem is. that should be addressed. And then white supremacy comes down in some order less than that. I haven't heard anybody say that. I'm willing to listen because I was searching for some system that's superior to the system of white supremacy that's here on this planet. And
so
I got frustrated. I mean, constantly searching for something because that's what I was grasping for. I was saying, where's the real nerve center, of what makes people act the way that they do? What's causing most of the problems on the planet and the most powerful influence on the planet? Where is it? What religion has the greatest influence? And then I'll tap into that and find out where the problems are, because we got plenty of problems all over the planet. Now, where's the nerve center of all of these problems? And I kept coming to the same conclusion. People who believe in racism. They are the most powerful people when it comes to getting anything done, whether it's constructive or non-constructive when it comes to things, but it's also the most powerful influence in mistreating people. And a system of justice, from a concept, since justice has never been produced, would be better. And that's what I started working from.
Okay.
But maybe I'm not working from the correct base. Maybe someone or some of the callers, and there are many callers, I guess, like I've been told, who said, why does he keep saying white supremacy? Why didn't he call it something? Call it, what would that it be? I have no idea of what it would be, where I could make sense. Maybe someone can tell me, and I'll refocus.
Okay. Let's see here. Then let's go to this before I go to you, Jay. Astrology says this. He says the white supremacists are not as powerful as Mr. Fuller says they are. The whole system is crashing. God is in charge, not a bunch of cavemen and monkeys from Europe. Yes, they were given bombs and bullets and built prisons for us, but those will be rendered useless very soon. How could they be that powerful when we are the original people? God wouldn't make the original people less powerful than these manimals that someone created only a few thousand years ago. We have made and done everything of significance, but, of course, through religion, public miseducation, and lies in the Jewish media, most of us think whites have done everything. All they do is kill, steal, rape, and then lie about his story books. Their time is up. I'm not giving them any respect whatsoever. There are supernatural ways to defeat them. There are supernatural ways to defeat them.
Can you hear me?
Yes, but I'm
Can you hear me?
Yes, I'm reading the Gmail now.
Yes, I can now. Yes.
Okay, well, I'm having a conflict here. I was reading the Gmail. I will. Is this Jay? I will get to you after I read this Gmail. This is a spiritual war, and we are not going to be fighting hand to hand. I know Mr. Fuller grew up in
Ray, R-A-E.
Okay. I know Mr. Fuller grew up in a environment. Let's see. Okay. Plus being in the military, so he views white supremacy as all powerful and undefeatable. He's wrong, and the proof is coming shortly. They are already dying out from a negative birth rate, melanoma from sunburn, overdosing on drugs, suicide, etc. Does that sound all powerful to you? No, it sounds like a cornered animal making his last stand. This came from Afroastrology, Mr. Fuller. This was his views, not yours, his views. He doesn't think that they are. What say you concerning that?
Oh, I say what I say in my book.
Okay.
And now there are people, like you said, and there are people who have told me they don't agree with that. then I say, okay, agree with whatever you think you should agree with, and act accordingly on a daily basis. My book is called the Compensatory Code, meaning I got to be doing something every day. And what I have been doing is whatever the white supremacists directly or indirectly tell me to do. That's all I'm dealing with. Now, how things are going to be in the sweet, glorious by and by, I don't know. But that's what I usually hear when people say, oh, the white supremacists, ain't no such thing as that. They ain't supreme. And then they'll say, their time is up. Now, it seems to be a contradiction somewhere. Because how much time do you need? I mean, if their time is up, why do we have this condition that we have now? Well, we're talking about, it ain't going to last long. Well, how long has it lasted? Well, you can't think negative. I'm talking about a situation that exists right this minute, because somebody's going to die right this minute on account of the system of white supremacy. People complain about that all the time, demonstrating in the streets about what's happening right this minute. The textbook for victims of white supremacy is about trying to do your best with what's happening right this minute. I'm not refuting what's going to happen 10,000 years from now. I'm just talking about you're not likely to be here 10,000 years from now. So what do you do right this minute when there's a gun in your face? That's what the textbook is all about, right this minute, and the next minute after that, and the next few minutes that you're going to have on this planet when you talk about time.
Okay. All right, let's do this. You are listening to the Counter Racist Code Show with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr., and I am your co-host, Mr. Bobby. To get in contact with the show, you can simply dial 516-453-9921, or you can Gmail me at the numero 7, Mr. Bobby, BOBBY, @gmail.com, and I will try to get you on. Okay, with that being said, let's go to Ray. Ray, sorry about what all happened, but you're back on. What is your question? Good morning, and what is your question for Mr. Fuller?
Good morning, Mr. Bobby. Good morning, Mr. Fuller. And
morning.
A quick comment. I've been kind of campaigning for Mr. Fuller to be nominated for the Nobel Prize because I sincerely believe he deserves it. And I just wanted to make that announcement to you and all your listeners. The word business is not defined in the Word God. And I wanted to ask Mr. Fuller why that is, and also to ask, mistakes are part of growth. When you see a black person, you should be seeing people who don't make mistakes. If Mr. Fuller could expound on that and discuss the lack of the word or missingness of the word business, I'd appreciate it. Okay,
Mr. Fuller?
I didn't hear. My hearing is not.
Okay, first of all, she says that she is campaigning to have you nominated for, I believe it was the Nobel Peace Prize, Ray?
Correct.
Okay, and
That's
then secondly,
right.
Secondly, now could you repeat that second question about business?
The word business is not defined, Mr. Fuller, and I would like to know why that is so. And also, your quote, mistakes are part of growth, but when we see a black person, we should be seeing people who don't make mistakes, people who are mistake-proof and, noted as problem solvers. How do we become that? And why is the word business not defined?
Okay. Mr. Fuller?
Well, there are a lot of words in the word guide that people can get by going to producejustice.com. So there's a whole ocean of words that are not in there. I just picked out a few words in the English language for people to think about, just to get people thinking at another level, seeing things from a different perspective. And so business can be described as what any standard dictionary will tell you that it is. Since I'm using a language that I didn't invent, I just learned a language, and language is nothing but tools. So I just didn't put business in there because I didn't think about it needed to be put in there. It's called a compensatory code, meaning making up for what's missing. I didn't think that was a key word, but it could be if a person is interested in it. But if you don't find a word in the Counter Racist Word Guide, we'll just use the Standard English Dictionary and go with that. And you can look at any word, even in the dictionary, just like I did. And if it doesn't make sense to you, come up with a compensatory definition that will make sense to you. But I just use the word business in the way that everybody else uses it, since words are nothing but tools anyway. All right, now as far as the Nobel Peace Prize, I don't care anything about what Mr. Noble says about peace, because it's named after a person named Alfred Noble, which I know very little about. And even if I knew all about him, I don't need his prize or anything like that. And another thing, I have not produced peace. I think the whole notion of handing somebody a prize for peace is incorrect. I don't think anybody should receive a peace prize when peace hasn't been produced by anybody. Just talking about it. I talk about peace. There are lots of people, a whole ocean of people talk about peace. But giving somebody a peace prize, no, peace is its own prize. I mean, the whole concept seems absurd to me. You put some type of medal around somebody's neck. I think that form of idolatry should, I just don't agree with it. I don't see any sense in the concept at all. None. Zero. In a world in turmoil, all this killing going on, even while a person is receiving one. And I'm a little doubtful about people being given prizes for anything anyway. Let excellent work be its own prize.
All right. Ray, thank you so much for your call, and don't be a stranger. Yeah. All right. All righty. Let's do this again. You're listening to the Counter Racist Code Show with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr., and I'm your co-host, Mr. Bobby. 516-453-9921 is the number that you can call, or 7Mr. Bobby at gmail.com is the number you want to use if you want to voice your opinion. That's the Counter Racist Code Show with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr., heard exclusively right here at producejustice.com. Okay, thank you very much. Let me do this right quick. Moon Pie, after I go to the caller, hit me up. I need to say something to you. Okay, let's go to Sua. Let me see if I can get you on here, and I'll get your comment in here too, JJ. Just a second here. Okay, Sua, you are now on with Mr. Neely Fuller, and you can be heard. Go ahead, please, sir.
Hey, Bobby. Good morning, Mr.
Good
Neely
morning.
Fuller. My question is, Mr. Neely Fuller, how early? I would say as early as possible, but I have a parent who wants to know when the earliest we should be talking about racism and white supremacy and teaching our youth about racism and white supremacy, and how to go about teaching them about this system.
How to go about teaching someone about white supremacy?
the like children, like an 8-year-old and a 6-year-old?
Oh, if any, people often ask me, what do you tell young people about anything? You tell young people the same thing you tell old people. You tell them the truth. Try to find out what the truth is. And if you don't know, you just say you don't know, but you'll try to find out. That's what you should tell anybody. It doesn't make any difference about the age of the person. And you usually tell them when they start asking questions. Always be ready to answer a person's questions. That's any person of any age. Because the person is ready to learn when they ask questions more than anything, or when they seem to be asking questions. Sometimes young people look around, they see things happening, and you see in their facial expressions or in their body language that they may have some questions about this. So you just sit down and patiently explain it to them, whatever it is. But people are at their best in talking about anything, racism or anything with that has to do with the comings and goings of people or creatures or animals or nature itself. Any questions that come from anybody, you just give them the answer to questions. And this is the process. Always be ready to and willing to answer people's questions. I came up around some people in the old days, particularly if young people would say, well, what about this and what about that? And some older people would say, you're asking too many questions. Don't ask so many questions. Keep your mouth shut. That is not healthy at all. There's no such thing as too many questions. Nowhere in the known universe. According to what? According to logic. Whenever questions are asked, those questions should be answered, even if the answer is, I don't know. But once you say, I don't know, that is an incentive to find out and say, I don't know, I'll try to find out, and I will answer you later as best I possibly can after I find out the answer to your questions. Why? Because all questions have an answer. It's just a matter of finding out what the answer is. And that's what you call progress. People want to know what progress is. You make progress through questions and answers. That's the key. You get the answers to all questions, you have made progress. Big time.
Thank you, Mr. Neely.
Did I answer the question? In the interest of progress. I hope I did. Hello, is anybody there? Have I been disconnected? Hello? Is anybody there? I'd like to hear somebody's voice. Technical difficulties, big time. I don't know if anybody can hear me or not. I certainly can't hear anybody.
Disconnected. I can hear you. Can you hear?
Okay, is anybody anywhere else that can hear us anywhere other than us talking to each other, Mr. Bobby?
Now, that I don't know. I just got a message from JJ that said that the show has been disconnected. I don't think that's good. I'll have the technicians get into that. Okay, he says back on now. Okay, we're back on, Mr. Fuller. Okay. I'm glad you made the last statement before the disconnection. It was concerning, do you remember the call last week concerning LaTosha? Mr. Fuller?
I'm here.
Okay. You remember the show last week concerning LaTosha?
No, I don't remember the name,
okay,
but what was the question last
she
week?
asked a lot of questions last week, and you just said that the answer to all problems is through questions and answers. And there were some listeners that were felt that that you took too long, or that I gave her too much space for you to answer her questions. But I told the listener, or those that Gmailed me, that you needed or wanted to make sure that she understood what was going on, and that's why you took the time, or the time was given to you to help her get her questions answered. What do you think about that? Was that the correct response to the people who were asking that question, that we took too long in addressing LaTosha's concerns?
Well, time is that way, and that's why we have this 2 hours, and we hope that we can get in as many questions answered as possible. And to the extent that we don't, and I don't answer the questions in a brief and concise and understandable manner, that's my fault. See, I'm not maybe using time adequately or in the correct manner, but I try to answer a person's questions so that they don't go away scratching their head or saying, I didn't get my question answered.
Yes.
And that's the difficulty in not just being competent enough on my part.
Mm-hmm.
See, in other words, I'm supposed to be skilled, which that's a skill I haven't learned, apparently, on account of we're getting complaints.
Mm-hmm.
So, I'm supposed to be able to get right to the point right quick. But sometimes people don't understand what I'm saying, or they are talking while I'm trying to answer, that's a problem too.
Yes.
And so we got confusion then. So
right.
The callers are correct when they say that I'm taking too much time, because I'm supposed to be able to answer in just a few words their questions. And so that everybody who is listening, not only the person who is calling, everybody is supposed to understand what is being said. Otherwise, what's the point in listening or calling?
Okay.
Understanding is everything.
Yeah, some of the people, especially Be Good One, who's on here, was saying that her questions was mixed with VGQ. And that's what a lot of people said, wrote to me, Mr. Fuller, about that. It wasn't exactly your fault, because you were trying to understand what she was trying to say, but then she also, and I don't know if she was aware of that, and no fault of hers, but there was VGQ mixed in with whatever she was trying to say, which made it very difficult for you to pinpoint what she was saying, or what you needed to answer, because you kept saying, excuse me, hold it, so that you could get whatever specifically she was saying. But anyway, it's all good, because it's all part of it, of learning, and all of us are still learning. You're still learning, I'm still learning, the viewers are still learning.
Yes, we're still learning, and part of codification is to improve on that by not making statements while you're asking a question. And
correct.
Most people do that. Sometimes I slip up and do it. I'll make statements while I'm asking a question. The two don't go together. You ask your question and put a question mark behind it, and don't make a statement. Don't say, for instance, this is the way it usually goes. Well,
okay.
Can you answer the question of what is white supremacy? And I have heard that, there's no such thing as that. And my opinion is there's no such thing as that. And now, see, I just gave an illustration of how that usually works. You ask a question, then immediately start making a speech. The two don't go together. That's not the codified procedure. The codified procedure, you ask a question, put a question mark behind it, and go silent.
Yes.
Then you get what? Clarity.
Yes, sir. And speaking of clarity, this is the time that we set aside for you to speak about your book briefly again, Mr. Fuller. So would you please speak about the book?
Yes, you can get the book called The Textbook Workbook for Thought, Speech, and/or Action for Victims of White Supremacy by going to producejustice.com. And what will come up on the screen is a brief description of a basic textbook, 2016 edition, and a 2010 addition to the 2016 edition, and also to the 1984 edition, called A Compensatory Counter-Racist Word Guide, showing you how to use words, and I mentioned this earlier, talking about the word business, which is not in there, but there are a number of words in there that are frequently used that people may have problems with, and just one of the words like what the whole book is about, racism. How many different forms there are of racism? Well, the book says that racism is white supremacy, and white supremacy is racism. And there's no other form of racism, because you can't have two supremacists in the same space. You either got supreme or you don't have. So white supremacy, if you got white supremacy, you can't have another form of supremacy. So therefore, white supremacy is the only form of racism. And it's another way of looking at things, the same thing, and talking about it in a different way. And it's a word guide, compensatory counter-racist word guide. And you can get the basic textbook and the word guide by going to producejustice.com. But the book that is most recommended is the basic textbook, Revised Expanded Edition, 2016 edition. It's there.
Yes.
And some descriptions about what the book is about. But basically it's for the victims of racism as individual persons, what you can do and suggestions about what not to do, what you say and what not to say on a daily basis, because you have to do and say something all day that you're awake when you're interacting with people. And so the book is to help you to get through each and every day in the most efficient, constructive manner.
Okay. And
if you're a person of color.
And again, I'm going to repeat myself. A lady from Canada indicated that she finally did get her books that you said that would be there, and she was very happy to get her book. She found out that the problem wasn't with your end, it was with the end that she has up in Canada, but she finally did get her book. So I told her on behalf of you, thank you. And then I want to thank you for sending me the original copy of the compensatory concept, which I have right
1984 edition.
Yeah, the 1984 edition, which you have said numerous times that people still request that book.
Yes, people still request it, and that's why I started reselling it. Really, the 2016 edition was supposed to make the 1984 edition obsolescent. Now, I didn't say obsolete. Obsolete means no good at all. Obsolescent means I got a new one out that covers everything that's in the old one, and it's got even more stuff in it. And that's why I said revised, expanded on the old one. But a lot of people said they wouldn't understand the new one without reading the old one. Some people, at least two people, I wouldn't say a lot, have said that. So that made me put the book back up there just in case somebody wants the original.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Okay. Well, anyway,
go to producejustice.com.
Okay, good.
Right.
Okay, let's do this here. If you want to call in, you can. The number is 516-453-9921. And be sure to press the number 1 button so you can go to the top of the line. You can also Gmail me at the numero 7, Mr. Bobby, BOBBY @gmail.com. And I will effort to read it, but it will go in rotation. Speaking about the Gmails, let's read this from Jakari. He says this, I'd like to correct something that Mr. Fuller often says on the program. He says white supremacy is the most powerful system to have ever existed in the known universe or something like that. First of all, we can only speak for this planet. We haven't been anywhere else that we remember. Second, the system isn't powerful, it's parasitic. In other words, it has fake power by taking power from us through mind control. That's not true power. That's parasitism. Mr. Fuller, he didn't agree with that. These are his words. What say you on his words?
VGQ comes right out of the book. Victims Guarantee Qualification. He's qualified to say that. And everybody should listen to every word that he just said. Every word. And then think about what he said. Think about everything that he said and see if it's logical. And look for the truth. That's anything that anybody says. Look for the truth. Not how anybody feels. I have feelings. Everybody has feelings. Feelings change every 5-10 minutes. You know, sometimes feelings stay the same for a lifetime. But be logical. Look for the logic in everything that Neely Fuller says, everything that he writes, and look for the logic in everything that someone else says. Follow the logic. So I'm saying, just the caller, I can't say that the caller doesn't know what he or she is talking about. I can't say that. That's a violation of the code. I'll just simply say they said what they said. That's what the code requires me to say. It's called Victims Guaranteed Qualification. Qualified to say anything you want to say about race, racism, and or counter-racism if you're a victim of racism. Look for the truth in anything that anybody says.
Okay. Let's see here. Let's do this. From the Gmails, Bunbo Nuki says this. Mr. Bobby, can you ask Mr. Fuller the following question, please? Being slaves under the system of white supremacy racism, can victims of white supremacy racism oppose slavery while at the same time they accept a religion that advocates in favor of slavery, such as in the Christian book of Exodus?
No, I don't think a person can go in opposite directions at the same time. You know, if you're traveling east, you can't be traveling west, except that maybe east is west. And so if you look at it like that, is bad good? Is up down? Is sideways the same as not sideways? I don't think so. I think that you're either going in one direction or another, but maybe all directions are the same, and all directions wind up being the same. But I don't think you can have opposing philosophies. I don't think that you can actually be fire and water at the same time. Maybe you can. I don't think so. But the compensatory code says that it's just all about solving problems.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you can figure out a way to have any kind of philosophy, and someone comes to you with a problem, someone comes to you with an earache or a toothache, and you stop the tooth from aching or the ear from aching, that sounds like a problem that's been solved. That's what codification is about. Counter-racist codification is about results. You just look at the result and say, now, is this constructive? I had a toothache. 15 minutes ago, I had an abscess on my tooth, and it's killing me. I don't want to talk about anything. Anybody who's really had a terrible toothache, they don't want to talk to anybody except somebody that can stop that pain. No conversations about baseball games or anything else. They want to stop that pain. I know I have, with a toothache. And so somebody stops the pain. Now, the problem has been solved. Now, was that the correct thing to do? And I would say yes. Why? I had pain. Now the pain is gone. I don't have the pain that I had. That's the result. And someone might step up and say, well, that's not the greatest thing in the world. There's a lot of greater things than that and all like that. And that was the greatest thing while I had that toothache. That somebody came that knew what to do, and they took away the pain. Now, that's what counter-racist science is about. We can philosophize and take all kinds of different viewpoints, but the question in counter-racist science is, was the pain relieved? Did the pain go away? Everything is either constructive or non-constructive, nothing in between. Did you get a constructive result? That's it.
All right. From the chat room, Be Good One says this, VGQ, I have been reading the King James Version of the Bible for some time now. What I notice is that so-called black people are repeating similar patterns as the people did back then. But so-called black people think because white people printed it, they don't learn from the examples. Seems like the code book is a modern version of the Bible. Only the Bible has actual examples of what the results would be when you act in similar ways. That's VGQ from Be Good One. They also like the example. He also like the example of what you just said about the toothache. Chat room is open, and the phone lines are open also at 516-453-9921. You are listening to the first hour of the Counter Racist Code Show with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. We have another hour to go. Stay tuned for the second hour of the Counter Racist Code Show with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. and co-host Mr. Bobby. We'll take 5 seconds and then we'll come right back in. Okay, welcome and good morning to the Counter Racist Code Show with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. I am your co-host, Mr. Bobby. Now, to get in contact with the show, call 516-453-9921, and be sure to press the number 1 button, and you'll go to the top of the line. And Mr. Fuller, if he's not answering the question, you'll be next, but he will answer your questions. You can also Gmail me at the numero 7, Mr. Bobby at BB. The numero 7 at Mr. Bobby, BOBBY, at gmail.com. Okay, interesting first hour. If you didn't hear the first hour, you may want to go back and check it out and see what's going on. We have a caller, but I don't have the name from the area code 310. I'm going to get you in and go ahead and give your name so that we know who we are talking to. Let me see if I can get you in here. Okay, we're buffering, and you are now on. Okay, go ahead. You're on with Mr. Fuller. Good morning, and what is your name?
Rashaki.
Rashaki. Okay, go ahead with your question for Mr. Fuller.
Yes, last week we had a caller call in twice, and it was kind of that you guys spent a lot of time speaking with her because I think what we talk about confusion. I think she was confused. That's just my opinion, maybe not. But what I would like to say to the listeners is this show is one of the best shows that I've ever been a part of, and I think it's what Mr. Fuller is doing is really helping a lot of people to make a change in their life for the best. So I have a quick question here.
Yes, sir.
About the pandemic. The pandemic, I don't know anybody that has the virus, and I don't know how valid it is. So I want to ask Mr. Fuller, what do we think about the pandemic and its validity?
Well, I think it's valid because I've heard of people dying enough to have credibility. And some of the sources that I hear sound credible to me. I haven't run into anybody who's had it or anybody who says they know somebody who's had it. But then that's just me. But I hear all kinds of things, some credible, some not. And I think the pandemic is real at this point. Now, later on, I might find out different, that the whole thing is a hoax, that these statistics that are being put out is all fabricated, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Weird things can happen in this planet. I've learned that in the little time I've been here. But I believe that this pandemic is actually what the people who say that it is what it is, that is very deadly and that is killing people on a large scale, and that it operates the way that they say that it operates, most people. I think I'm thinking on the side of this most likely is true at this point. Now, when I get further information, my mind might change on that. But my sources of information is just about the same as the average person's, I guess. So I just go along with that and take the precautions, like I do with the weather. People might report that it's going to be a storm. And I have found that when I hear that there's going to be a storm, most of the time there is one. Sometimes there isn't. It passes by. But then most of the time there is a storm. So you do get information that is false in the system of white supremacy. And you get information that is true. So it's just a matter of trying to guess, because that's really what you're doing. What is false and what is true? It's a guessing thing. Because the white supremacists know how to mix things that are true with things that are false. They're experts at that.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Brother Russia Key. But I will say this, Brother Russia Key. Gmail me at my Gmail address, and I will forward you some information that you might find to be helpful. Anyway, thank you for your call, and don't be a stranger, my brother. Appreciate that. Okay, Mr. Fuller, before we go to the next call, that's going to be Joseph, then Sua is back. Concerning the census, somebody wanted to know if you filled out or participated in the 2020 census.
Yes.
Okay. All right. There you have it.
That. I have no problems with it unless somebody points out to me something that I should know. That this is going to be harmful, and explain to me how it's going to be harmful, then I will think about that and act accordingly. I only go with information that I have because as a prisoner of war of the system of racism, like I said, you're a prisoner of war, you get all kind of rumors in a prison about this, that, and the other, and then you get things that are said that are true. You get falsehood, mixed with truth. And that's any time in the system of white supremacy, you are subject to get things said that are not true mixed up with things said that are true. And you have to just rack your brain trying to figure out all the time the difference.
Okay. Let's go to the phone lines here. Wait a minute. All right, Joseph in the 682. You are up and at 'em. Good morning, and what is your question for Mr. Fuller?
Good morning, Mr. Bobby. Good morning, Mr. Fuller.
Morning, Joseph.
I just want to make a comment about the conversation, the constructive conversation that's happening every Tuesday. I think that is it's amazing. I think that's something we need in the community because growing up, it was always hard to get people to talk about stuff and just sit down and have a conversation about things. So I really appreciate that. And I will have one question.
Yes, sir.
Do you think, Mr. Fuller, do you think that racism, white supremacy has come so advanced nowadays that the way that they get us is through the culture? They give us culture, say this is your culture, but through your own culture, they use the people that you look up to get you into things that lowers you as a person and keeps you further from getting justice in society today.
Well, the white supremacists never make a move unless it's going to give strength to the system of white supremacy. That's why they have been in business for so long. They think of everything, not just some things. They cover everything. And deception is the main thing that they use. Now, how do you deceive people? Through mixing truth with something that's false. See, the white supremacists don't lie all the time. They tell the truth most of the time. But they will say 8 things that are absolutely true. And then they will poison all 8 of those things they said that are true with 2 things that are not true. So non-white people, they're victims, they're prisoners of war, have to always be scratching our heads. The non-white people, saying now, are they telling me the truth this time, or are they lying? And which one of the things? They said about 12 or 15 things. Now, it's a lie in there somewhere, because that's how they operate. But then you might check out, they said 15 things, and you might check it out, and all 15 were true. Or all 15 may be a lie. Or some of those things are true. It's just a guessing game all the time. That's why they are so excellent at it. They are the best in the world at that type of thing. So when you get just a little bit of information about anything, first thing you think about is, I doubt if that's true. That's the way to go. And then you start trying to find out whether or not it really is true. Mm-hmm. But you go in with doubts all the time. Why? Because the white supremacists are the greatest deceivers in recorded history, which is why they are successful. Why are they successful? Because anyone who can deceive people and expert at it can always dominate people. If I can fool you about everything all the time, I'm going to be your master all of the time. That's just the way it works.
All righty. Joseph, thank you for your question. And as I tell everybody, do not be a stranger. Mr. Fuller, before I go to Sue again, you're listened to, or this program is listened to all across the world as we know it. I want to say the universe, but anyway, I know today we got people from Madagascar listening, from Spain, from so-called South America, and this person that I'm getting ready to reference has written several times, Mr. Mackin, and he wrote this. He says, Mr. Fuller, are you aware of the ongoing court battle in England between the founder of the controversial website WikiLeaks, Mr. Julian Assange, and the U.S. government over his extradition to the United States of America to stand federal charges for espionage? I have seen a few people online refer to your mantra, quote, stand by your work, end of quote, in reference to Mr. Assange, and that he should not fight the extradition from England because he knew what he was getting himself into before he started. Mr. Fuller, could you please talk about your mantra, quote, stand by your work, end of quote, and in this instance, with regard to Mr. Assange being a white male, does it apply to him also?
Everybody should stand by whatever it is that they choose to do, or even if they are forced to do something by a power that they perceive can do great harm to them. They should say what that force is. Say, yes, I did this, but I did it. I signed this confession under coercion. They put a gun to my head. They did Luca Brasi head, like in the movie Godfather. You know, either my brains or my signature would be on that confession. And so I signed it. I confessed to it, if that's the case. And just say that was what happened. And say, well, did you do it? Say, no, I didn't do it, but I said I did it. Say, well, I mean, you said you did it, so you're confessing. Yeah, but the guy had a gun to my head. Okay, you got to factor that in, too. We got a little bit of context here. All right? So that could be the case. I'm not saying that's the case in that particular case, but I'm saying anything that anybody does, particularly if it's harm to someone else, stand by your work. As we speak right now, some black person is out there robbing somebody. Well, you rob somebody and you make it look like somebody else did it. That cannot be condoned under any circumstance. You stand by your work. Yes, I did. I was short of money, couldn't get no job, blah, 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 blah. But don't make it look like somebody else did it. Homeboy or anybody else, Neely Fuller or anybody else. I chose to rob the person. I'm going to stand by my work. Come and get me if you can catch me. If you think you got that kind of muscle. See, we can't keep condoning people doing things, or we don't have any footing when it comes to opposing white supremacy. We're trying to get rid of any kind of harm coming to anyone. If espionage causes harm that's unjust, harm against someone who should not be harmed, no, that's not to be condoned under any circumstance or ignored. 200 black people, they said this year so far, maybe more, in a place called Chicago, killing each other. Every last one of the people that did that killing should stand by that work. Name themselves as having done what they did. You killed a person and ran and hid, and de facto, you're making it look like somebody else did it. Might get somebody else arrested, doing life imprisonment for something that you did. No, that's your work. Stand by your work. Stand by your work. And be able to say why you did it. If you did it to rob somebody, you should stand by that work too, all the way, and embrace what happens to you, because you just made somebody dead. You shot somebody for the little money that they happen to have. Yeah, you should go all the way with that by shooting yourself eventually.
Yes.
That's the way that works according to the law of compensation. Yes, you should shoot yourself after you do something like that. No exceptions.
All righty. Let's go to the phone lines. Swa is back. I think I got the pronunciation correctly. Okay, there you go, Swa. Okay, go ahead, sir.
Yeah, you did pronounce it excellently. Mr. Neely Fuller, in your book, you say that once it was something along the lines of once in effective numbers, people are talking about racism and white supremacy. The white supremacists have two choices: to kill all non-white people or to end white supremacy. And I think this is something I find to be very important and something I share with my book club quite a lot. But I want to make sure I'm understanding this correctly. So could you elaborate on this?
Oh, that what the compensatory counter-racist code ultimately is to do about racism, and that is to force the white supremacists to make a decision, and that decision will be to kill all of non-white people or do justice. Well, regardless of what approach we use to end racism, that would be the choice they'd have to make anyway. Some people say the approach should be to demonstrate in the street, and that actually works to force the white supremacists to make a decision. They're going to have to make that decision ultimately anyway. There's just two ways they can go. We're asking for justice, begging for justice. And the white supremacists say, well, I'm not about producing justice. White supremacy is not about producing justice. Justice means guaranteeing that no one is mistreated and guaranteeing that people who need help the most gets the most constructive help. That's not what white supremacy is about. White supremacy is about guaranteeing white supremacy, and that's it, by any means necessary. And that includes, for sure, not only includes, it demands mistreatment. And it demands that people who need help the most will not get it. That's what white supremacy means. That's the essence of it. That's the whole thing. That's the whole show. So now, if we're going to get rid of that, it means we have to make a decision. We're going to scrap the system of white supremacy and replace it with a system of justice. Or, if we're going out of business as white supremacists, it means we're going to kill all the non-white people. If we kill them all, we can't be white supremacists anymore because they're gone. Wow. We're not supreme over black people because there's no black people to be supreme over. But I say that the white supremacists will elect to go with the justice thing, simply because in order to be a white supremacist, you have to have non-white people. If you don't have non-white people, white people will be forced to just stand around on the planet looking at each other and having the combative minds that they have. Then the only option they would have then is to destroy each other and destroy themselves. And I don't think they'd see much point in that. So the white supremacists will probably opt for the second option. Go out of business as white supremacists and let us replace that system with the system of justice. That's the concept. That's the logic. I hope I explained it in a way that the person understands.
Thank you.
All righty. Thank you, Swa. And don't be a stranger, my brother. All right. Thank you. Mr. Fuller, this is a Gmail from, let's see if I can get the name pronounced correctly, Roku. He says, first of all, good day. He said, I would like to assure Mr. Fuller that I am in perhaps complete agreement in the author's concept that racism is dominant in all areas of activity: education, entertainment, economics, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, and war. Additionally, and this is where I'm asking you, Mr. Fuller, to consider aloud if you may consider that another notable activity like the ones named exclusively that we are in urgency to expound on. That critical activity is medicine, not drugs, because drugs are made to cause confusion in the body, just like white supremacy. Medicine is connected to the other activity as they all are mutually inclusive to each other, as the code tells us. I want to learn your thoughts, Mr. Fuller, on that activity. Ascertain if that is a part of one of the already listed activities and or inspire thought on the subject, especially to the ones that need it the most. We, the victims of white supremacy, racism. Thank you kindly, Roku.
A lot of people have said that, but usually it comes in the form of a word called health. Health. Health meaning healing. Healing. So I thought about that when I was making the 9 areas of activity. Should I add health? And so I batted it around in my mind, and I said, well, I could have 30 areas of activity, maybe 40 if I just want to chop it up into fine pieces. But I said, I'm going to put health, incorporate that under time and energy, the use of time and energy. And that would be, so will I use that by adding time and energy as areas of activity? I said, I'll just incorporate time and energy under economics, because economics is the use of time and energy, and if you use time and energy correctly, you have health. That's where the problem is with anything healthy. And then I thought about, okay, what about the other areas of activity? Why put it under economics exclusively? Say, well, it's not under economics exclusively. It's also under education. You're healthy if you have learned. What is education? Learning what you need to know. So if you learn what you need to know, you are a healthy person, because you're going to do the things that need to be done. That's going to make you healthy, and you're not going to make any mistakes. And what about entertainment? The third area of activity. Same thing. If you're healed, if your entertainment heals you, you don't have the kind of entertainment like people are looking forward to having. Usually when they have a party in the backyard, they're going to have a whole lot of stuff that they're going to be eating or drinking and or snorting. That's under entertainment. But is it healthy? Is it economical? Is it the correct use of time and energy? Because economics is about how you use time and energy. Okay? And the answer is no. Because you got poison there. You got whiskey and gin and all that there. You know, summertime, backyard party. You got a little alien stuff there that you're putting into your body. And that includes some of the, what you call delicious food. It tastes good. Well, a lot of things may taste good, but it might not be the best for you. Okay? So everything in all of the 9 areas of activity have to be healed. Politics needs healing. What is politics? people relations. And that definitely needs healing. The SARS, some of the SARS, well, these SARS relations in the world, other than relations between white and non-white, I mean, it's pitiful the way that non-white people interact with each other, particularly in the northwestern hemisphere between black people and really all over the world. That Rwanda thing in 1994, 800,000 black people chopping each other to death. About what? About something that's pure nonsense. No justification for that at all. 800,000 in about 2 weeks, if the reports are correct. That's astronomical, and it's hardly mentioned today. That should be talked about and talked about and talked about and talked about and talked about. How did that happen? Black people hugging each other more than anybody on earth. We do a lot of hugging, and that's one thing that the virus, I say, that's a real plus. Stop black people from all this hugging. All this fist bumping, and then hug. Football players hugging each other. Back off and do some thinking. Because these hugs don't mean a thing when you look at the murder rate just among black people in the northwestern hemisphere. I started talking about this earlier in the program. Chicago and a lot of other places. 200 people dead. About what? Foolishness. When you look at the details of every one of those incidents, dead people, as we speak right now, black people, tribal war, and people called Indians, talking about their proud heritage. Now, look at it. What were you doing? Well, we had warriors even before we encountered white people, warring tribes. And the white supremacists walked into that mess and took one look at it and said, these people are a piece of cake. We know all about warring tribes, and we know how to also come together and take care of any group of people of color who are warring against each other. That's tailor-made for us. And all over so-called Africa, we're talking about our proud African heritage. But what do we talk about? Those spears weren't just for killing animals and eating them. Those spears were for killing each other. And they took great pride in this and still do. So we need to tell the truth about ourselves. That's a huge weakness. Pure nonsense. Every ounce of it is pure nonsense. My tribe, my gang, my sorority. Well, people on this planet is fragile, and the virus has proven that. If there's any truth in the matter of this virus at all, it's proven. We are all here together on this one fragile planet. We're having fires, floods, viruses, earthquakes all over the place. We need to be able to get along with each other like we do when these things hit us all. Okay? Why can't we get along when these things are no longer existing? No fires, no earthquakes, no floods, none of these environmental disasters, we call them. We are an environmental disaster. All of the people of this planet, if we tell the truth, and the white supremacists is the worst of them. Why? Because they're the smartest and most powerful. That's the analysis, according to the code, according to logic.
All righty. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Fuller. You're listening to the Counter-Racist Code Show with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr., for those who have just joined. I'm your co-host, Mr. Bobby. To get in contact with the show, call this number, 516-453-9921, and press or depress the number 1 button, and you will go to the head of the line, and you will be next with your questions. You can also Gmail me at the numero 7, Mr. Bobby, BOBBY, at gmail.com, and I will effort to get you on this week. If I don't, you will go into rotation, and your question will be answered. And when it does, I will inform you of the date and of the time that your question will be answered. Again, you're listening to the Counter Racist Code Show with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr., and I am your co-host, Mr. Bobby. Before I go to the Dallas area, the 972 area, Jay Brinson had this statement, Mr. Fuller. He says that according to a report on CNN dated 2020/09/08, the information came out that said that white supremacy is a most lethal threat. Wow. This comes from a threat to the U.S. and, DHS, what is that, Department of Homeland Security? Yeah, and it was a draft assessment, according to this report from CNN, that white supremacy is a most lethal threat. And that comes from the U.S. Department of Homeland, I guess it's Homeland Security, DHS. Anyway, that was what the draft said. I didn't see that draft, but that was sent to me, so that's something to think about. At least they're thinking about it, or allegedly made this comment. Let's go to the phone line to the Dallas area. So I had 972 area. See if I can get you on. You are on. There you go. Go ahead, my brother. How are you this morning?
I'm still learning.
You're still learning. Go ahead, my brother.
Yes, sir. Good morning, Mr. Fuller and Mr. Bobby. I have a question that's coming out of the 2016 edition of the book, of the code book, and on page 336.
336.
Yes, sir. At the bottom of the page, and I'm not going to read the whole paragraph for the sake of time, but Mr. Fuller writes, during the existence of white supremacy racism, non-white males and non-white females are not permitted to function as men and women. They are only permitted to function as race children, and persons who are subject to white supremacy. Children cannot be married. They can only be mated. Men and women can be married. Therefore, during the existence of white supremacy racism, only white people can function as married people and only to each other. So my question is for Mr. Fuller is that since non-white people can be married, should we be monogamous in these attempted marriage relationships?
Be monogamous meaning what?
Meaning not
what do you mean by monogamous?
Not cheating on your spouse if you're not married.
Not cheating on your spouse?
Yes, if you want to use that term. Or
well, here's the way the code handles that. The code handles, when you say cheating, you mean deception. So therefore, I put in the code book, it's somewhere in the area of sex. There's a long list of questions and answers that non-white people should be able to ask and answer to each other when they decide that they're going to engage in sexual intercourse, because that's really where everything really starts. That's where the rubber meets the road, you might say. The first act of sexual intercourse, up till then, people are just talking. That's what you call relating. But they're relating, you relate to everybody. But if you're not having sexual intercourse, I mean, what the relationships, you can call it a marriage, you can call it a partnership, you can call it anything. But it's really not serious until you're engaging in sexual intercourse. So the code goes right to the logical point, the most important point, and that is it handles what about sexual intercourse? Even when you're talking about cheating, what is cheating? All right, it's all kinds of cheating, but in what you call a marital situation, cheating is usually associated with some form of sexual intercourse. So therefore, before a non-white male with female, which is what marriage according to the code would be, before they engage in the first act of sexual intercourse, they will ask and answer a number of questions, and samples of these questions is in that the area of sex in the textbook for victims of white supremacy. And there's quite a few of them. Real serious questions about everything, not just about sexual intercourse itself, but it's about everything that you are subject to want to know about your prospective partner, the person you're going to get married to. You can go ahead and do it, but you shouldn't have sexual intercourse in that interaction with that person until all of those questions are asked and answered. And that will eliminate any so-called cheating. That's the logic of it. Why? Because you will know everything that there is to know about the person. A person should not be alien to you, even though that's a real stretch. Everything that there is to know about that person, but that's what the code says that black people, non-white people, should do. They should ask and answer all questions about your past and the things you're likely to do or not do or want to do in the future, so that there's no guesswork in the quote-unquote relationship. Now, that's the logic of it. Something that people don't do. Usually people are satisfied with just 10 or 15 questions, and then that's it. No, there should be almost like a whole ocean of questions and answers before the first act of sexual intercourse. After the first act of sexual intercourse, then it's kind of a done deal already. I mean, you've already broken the code, you might say. You can't use the codified procedure. So before the first act, there should be dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens of questions asked and answered. Each person should ask and answer these questions.
Alrighty.
That would help to make a quality relationship.
All right. Thank you, my brother from Dallas, Saeed and Shahad. Thank you very much. Don't be a stranger. Okay, let's go to the international flavor on this one. Way over in the concept called Italy. We have, if I can get her up here, on the line, okay, there you go. Joy from Italy. How are you?
Hello?
Yes, you're on.
Hi, yes. I love, Mr. Fuller, how you redesigned your Produce Justice platform to accommodate your previous playbacks. But I would request that you add...
Hello? Hello, Joy? Tell you what, if she calls back, have her... send her to the front of the line. Mr. Fuller, while we're doing that, why don't we take time to have you speak about your book? Go ahead, please, sir.
Yes, you can get the book by going to producejustice.com. And I was just talking about the area of sex, and a sample list of questions and answers that I was talking about in that area in answer to the caller's questions. And I hope that I was answering the caller's questions simply by saying that will resolve a lot of potential conflict in advance. It'll eliminate it. Because if you know everything about a person, say in the 8th area of activity, that you will possibly ever want to know before you have sexual intercourse with that person, that's in the 8th area of activity, sex, and you know everything that you will ever want to know about that person before the first act of sexual intercourse, you should have a smooth interaction when the relationship gets in depth, like so-called marriage, if you get into that situation, because it shouldn't be any major problems. There will be some problems, things unforeseen, but there shouldn't be any major ones because you know everything that there is to know that you ever will want to know about the person before the first act of sexual intercourse with that person. Now, the entire book is about how to interact with all people in all areas of activity: economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, and war, both white people and non-white people, each and every day in all of those areas of activity, and how to, the things to do, things not to do, the things to say, things not to say. There are examples all through the book, the textbook for victims of white supremacy, to make your day what? More constructive, make your day easier, each and every day that goes by. And if you, each and every day, you do things that are always successful in a constructive manner, it doesn't get any better than that. That's what the book is supposed to be about, making each and every day that you're on this planet a day where things at the end of that day are better than they were at the beginning of that day. That's the ultimate goal. And how do you do that? How do you do that magic? Well, it's not magic, it's logic. Everything that people do should be based on logic, cause and effect. And what does that mean? What does that, when you say logic? Well, you put it in the realm of constructive and non-constructive. And what you want to always do is have a constructive result, not a non-constructive result, for everything that you say and do. Now, that requires some thinking and some studying, and the book is designed to help you do that in all 9 areas of activity. That's the intention of the book. And you can get it by going to producejustice.com. Producejustice.com.
Okay.
And you'll see 3 volumes up there, but the volume called the 2016 Expanded Volume has an addition to it called the Word Guide. But basically, they're the same book.
Okay.
Producejustice.com.
All right. And before we go back to Joy from Italy, she's back. Let me say this. A caller called in the first hour saying that she was promoting Mr. Fuller for the Nobel Peace Prize, and Mr. Fuller gave his response to that. But someone else wrote in about Mr. Noble, and Alfred Bernard Noble was a Swedish chemist, engineer, inventor, businessman, and philanthropist. He held 355 different patents, dynamite being the most famous of these. The synthetic element nobelium was named after him. That came from information from Wikipedia. Okay. Anyway, let's go back to Joy. Let me see if I can get you on here, Joy. Okay, Joy, you're back on. Go ahead, please.
Thank you. My question is, Mr. Fuller, should non-whites donate their organs?
Should non-whites do what? Hello? cut off again? I can't hear anybody now. I don't know if anybody can hear me, but I can't hear anybody. So we're having technical difficulties again. I'll wait. Mr. Bobby, can you hear me? Can anybody hear me? I don't hear anybody.
Mr. Fuller, can you hear me?
I can hear you now.
Okay, Mr. Bobby was temporarily cut off, and Joy's question was, should non-whites donate their organs?
Donate their organs?
That was her question before she was cut off.
Should non-whites donate their organs?
Yes.
If they choose to do so, in my opinion, it's logical. If it will help somebody, everything is about producing constructive results. But you want to, first of all, make sure you're not injuring yourself to the extent that you become incapacitated. Because, but I don't see any harm in doing that. There may be something I don't know about, but if it's harmful to anybody, that should be considered before anybody does it. But if it helps two people instead of one, well, we all make sacrifices. We all trying to work to help not only ourselves but somebody else. That's what we're supposed to be here for. So organ donations could be considered something constructive. I think it could be at first glance. I would have to think about it more now that the question has been asked. I hadn't thought about it very much, but it seems logical that in some circumstances, yes, you could donate an organ if it doesn't incapacitate the person doing the donating, because you don't want to, the code says, solve problems without making any. So that's the summation of that. Now, you can solve that problem, but did you make another problem in the process? Did you make a problem for yourself or for others? Did you endanger yourself when you donated an organ? But if you could afford whatever that means, then it seems logical in a crisis that you could do so. Depends on context, circumstances.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody who jumps in the water to save somebody else, first thing you do is make sure you're not endangering yourself, because two people are going to drown. All right? So you think about that. You don't want that to happen.
Okay. All righty. Hope that answered your question, Joy. Mr. Fuller, we got about 11 minutes. Could you speak very, very briefly about your book, and then we'll take a couple more calls and a Gmail statement. Go ahead, please, sir.
Everything that we've been talking about, or something close to it, is in the textbook for victims of white supremacy that you can get by going to producejustice.com. Producejustice.com. And the perspective on problem solving, that's what it's all about, is the paramount message of the book and its edition. It's there. You'll see 2 volumes. There are actually 3, but basically it's 2. The revised expanded edition of the textbook for victims of white supremacy, and in addition to the same volume called A Counter-Racist Word Guide. Because what is the objective of the book? To eliminate racism. And we know that to be the system of white supremacy. Eliminate that system and replace it with a system, hypothetically, meaning something you think about. It's never happened. But a system that would be better. And that system that would be better is a system called justice, which means guaranteeing that no person is mistreated, no person, nowhere in the known universe, no person is mistreated, and guaranteeing that the person that needs help the most gets the most constructive help. And everything in those volumes are supposed to be pointed toward that initial goal, and then the ultimate goal of producing what we call universal man and universal woman, which means people who are in perfect tune with everything that is of constructive value in the known universe, that you never do anything that's non-constructive.
Yes.
And we should practice doing that. Go to producejustice.com. Producejustice.com. That's what the books are about.
All righty. TZ Wiki has written this, Mr. Fuller. He says, Mr. Fuller, what is the logical question that a victim of white supremacy can ask a white supremacist who says that white people were made to serve God and black people to serve white people? Would it have a constructive result to ask such a white person how this can be verified, or would that cause conflict?
Well, the conflict is already there, so you just want to resolve the conflict, and you can ask any question that would help to do that. And so a white person who would make that statement to me, I would just use a codified response. I would just say, well, I don't believe that's true. That would be my response. The person is telling me that. And I would just simply say, I don't believe that's true. And the reason I don't believe it's true is because if you're a white supremacist, you use deception to do harm to people. You're not deceiving people to do something constructive. You're using deception. And you don't have to deceive. I don't think that would be a part of a package that would be mandated by a creator. So I don't think that you got that message correctly, sir or ma'am. And be polite when you respond. Mm-hmm. I don't believe that's true, and I think a system of justice would be better than a system of white supremacy, because a system of white supremacy calls for deception. It calls for violence. It calls for violence. It glorifies violence. The evidence shows that. And I don't think that the Creator had that as an intention in assigning somebody to do that type of thing. Deceiving people, being violent to people, against people, taking people right from the womb and having them doing all sorts of incorrect things. I don't think that that's what a creator had in mind and assigned you to do what I see you doing, sir or ma'am, if you are a white supremacist. I don't think that you were assigned to do the things that I'm looking at you doing. And that's just my opinion, sir or ma'am. And I am going to resist it.
Okay, another question from the Gmails. Says, Mr. Fuller, I've heard that within the impeccable question lies the answer to the question itself. In other words, if we ask a question in the exact perfect way, then the answer is already contained within the question. Have you ever heard of that, Mr. Fuller?
Yes, I have. I've heard that. I don't know exactly what it means in function, but I've heard that. Okay.
In your words, you've heard that. What do you think of? What are your thoughts on that as you have reviewed that within yourself?
I hadn't thought about it that much. I thought about it on the surface. I said, well, it's a academic exercise, I might call it that. But exactly what does it mean? So it would mean whatever a person explains to me, what he or she means when they say it to me. So I would have to ask that. See, part of the code is to always get clarification. And I don't have clarification on that. Because I didn't invent that premise.
Mm-hmm. Okay. As we winding down the show right now, when you get information, you get information from the television, I suppose, different newscasts. I've heard you mention the Washington Post. What other papers or sources would be a better word that you get your information from, and how does that work with the statements that you have written?
Oh, I have everything from Essence Magazine to the Afro-American newspaper out of Baltimore, and AARP. Just about anything that I see where it's print on it, I'll pick it up. Catalogs, you name it. I glance at anything that I see in print, and I get a lot of things in print. I have quite a few books that I have not opened at all.
Okay.
I'll never have time to read them, but I would like to have that time, and it would take me 100 years to read all of them that I want to read, but I read everything. Any kind of magazine, whatnot, I just pick them up and read them. Books about the elderly, because I'm in that category. Books about health. Just anything that I think might give me some constructive information, because everything is connected. See, that's one of the premises of the codified procedure. Read everything. Listen to everybody. Listen to everybody's viewpoint. Don't shut yourself off from any source of information. You never can tell when you just look at one sentence in one newspaper or one book, just one sentence that will have an impact on you for the rest of your days. And you will think back and say, that had more influence on me than all the speeches I ever heard put together. Just one sentence that you saw on the back page of a book.
Okay, we've got about 2 minutes left. Transcendent said this, said Mr. Fuller has a list of 100 questions, but most people are not serious enough to ask those prior to sexual intercourse. Why, in your opinion, Mr. Fuller, or according to the code, people won't ask those questions prior to sexual intercourse?
Because people don't want to hear anything except they want to hear. And the code says people have to fight that within themselves. Like people don't want to hear, and they have said it. Somebody say there's such a thing as white supremacy. Well, it's not a matter of what you want to hear. It's a matter of what is the truth. And so if something you think is not true or not constructive, I mean, you find out what is constructive or what is the truth. And that's it. Always go with what is true, not how anybody feels. Feelings change every 2 or 3 minutes, but you want to follow the logic of the universe. That's what Neely Fuller has to follow. And he makes mistakes, because you're going to make mistakes looking for the truth. You're going to make a lot of them. But you correct them as you find out the difference between truth and falsehood.
Okay. All righty. Well, Mr. Fuller, we've come to that point that the show is about to come to an end, but we thank you, Mr. Fuller. We thank you. Thank all the callers and all the Gmailers from all over the planet. Thank you. We apologize for any interruptions that we had. We've had a few, but we'll try to do better the next time. All right, you've been listening to the Counter-Racist Code Show at ProduceJustice.com. Thank you again, Mr. Fuller. Thank you, callers, and we'll see you next week.
ProduceJustice.com. Thank you.